Kei ngā kahika o te nehe nui, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai ki te whare o te reo irirangi o Maniapoto. Welcome to another webinar series, Te Puna Kōrero o te nehe nui. Well, last week, the government released this year's budget, and it's been said that it's full of initiatives to speed up our economic recovery and ease cost pressures for New Zealanders. Others have called it a budget that is simply a vanilla cake with chocolate sprinkles. To break it down for what the budget actually means for our whānau here in Maniapoto, I'm joined tonight by Adrian Rurawhe, MP for Te Tai Hauāuru. E te rangatira, tēnā koe, thank you for being with us this evening. It's lovely to see you once again.
Tēnā koe, wini tano tira kia koutou, hokorongo mai nā I tēnei pō tēnei te mihi aki kia koutou katoa. Kia ora mai tātou.
Kia ora. Now, before we get into our kōrero about the budget, and we know that it must have been a busy time for you leading up to the budget, I guess just want to check in and, how have you been? How is your whānau at the moment?
Yeah, whānau's really good. It's been testing times for a lot of our whānau throughout the electorate, coping with COVID, coping with the pressure on surviving, the cost of living. Personally, my whānau's well. Some of the whānau have been through the COVID experience. But we've all come out at the other end, just looking forward to progressing our policies with the budget that was announced last week.
Ka pai. Well, it's lovely to hear that everyone is doing well, and you touched on the cost of living, and we know that that's one sector of the budget that the Finance Minister spoke about. I guess that's probably a good place to start our kōrero this evening. And I guess if I can just ask you, do you think that with this year's budget, was it a win for Māori in your eyes?
I'm aware of a lot of commentary out there. This is the overall budget spend is over $128 billion. The Māori specific funding is 1.2 billion, which sounds like a really low number in comparison. I would, argue that, in 2017 it was $120 million. So we've had a 900% increase in the period that we've been in government. But I'll stress the point that's a Māori specific funding. So that's the funding that goes to health commissioning, whānau order, and a whole lot of other kaupapa specific to Māori. The rest of the pūtea, say the $800 million that we're putting aside for one of our cost of living initiatives, the a payment to adults that earn $70,000 or less. That doesn't include any of that money going to Māori, and that's the same with the 11.7 billion extra dollars we're spending in health. That doesn't include there's money in there will go to Māori whānau as well. Doesn't include that. And so to get a real, if we're comparing apples to apples, you've got to take into account the other 98% of the budget, and we're in there as well. So I think overall we've done incredibly well over the last 5 years. As I say, a 900% increase in direct funding for Māori initiatives.
You've touched on a number of topics there, including that payment for those that earn under $70,000, and we will touch on that a little bit later on. The Māori Party came out slamming this year's budget, and they refer to it as the vanilla cake with chocolate sprinkles, and they broke it down. They broke the figures down and they simplified it, where they mentioned that of the $157 billion, Māori received less than 1% of that figure. So how do you respond to that when they've kind of broken down all of those numbers, and I guess they've given us the proof in the pudding, if you like?
Yeah, I don't know if it is proof. I mean, I'll be really generous, but the last budget that they had, which was in 2017, the Māori Party secured $120 million of direct funding to Māori. I don't criticise that. Despite the fact we've increased it by 900% ourselves, I don't criticise it because I know that in the rest of the budget, there are budget lines which includes pūtea that actually goes to Māori whānau. And it's an unfair comparison for me to say about the budget that they got and for them to say about the budget that we got without considering that fact. So the fact of the matter is, for example, as I said before, the increase in the health spend is 11.7 billion. Māori, we get about $500 million in addition to that. But the key thing that everyone needs to consider is that the Māori Health Authority will have a say on how every cent of that $11.7 billion is spent. Now, the Māori Party will say what they have to say, and because they're in opposition to the government, so they oppose. My question to them is that if they were so good, then why is it that they got considerably less when they were last in government, and what would they do, and how would they achieve it, given that the only alternative to a Labour-led government is national, and they're saying that we're spending far too much on Māori.
There's certainly room for discussion in that. We look at the cost of living payment, and we know that the government has allocated around $814 million for the $350 per person cost of living payment, and that's been earmarked for low income earners under $70,000, and we're aware that payment is going to be made across 3 parts from August this year. It's going to affect around 2.1 million people. So with that, because the government has labelled those who earn under $70,000 as low income earners, will the tax thresholds reflect that? And will the eligibility criteria for assistance from the likes of work and income and the likes of IID, the family assistance, and the working for families, will those then become more accessible for those low income earners under that $70,000 threshold?
Yeah, that threshold is, we're describing it as low to middle income New Zealanders. That's 2.1 million people. If we have a look at low income, it's more like about 1 million people, even below that 2.1 million. And that together with all the people who are receiving some kind of either benefit or like the winter energy payment, and now this, it's about 80% of all New Zealanders. And so the only ones that do not get any support from the government are in the top 20% earners in the country. The point that I would make is that it's a very targeted cost of living support for low to middle income New Zealanders, and those who don't receive any other form of government support. So, but to get to your question, I think the important thing for us is that we are targeting the support to where it's needed at a time that it's needed. So this is a temporary arrangement, and that is based on the predictions about growth in the economy and what's happening with inflation globally. So, we're in about the middle of the pack in terms of where inflation is. The issues that, our government has no control on, and that's the supply chain issues due to COVID-19. It's to do with the fuel prices because of the war in Ukraine, and it's affecting the whole world. We've got in the UK 9% inflation, and up around 8% in the US. So these are all factors that impact on what happens here. So we're, as I say, making it very targeted. We're putting it in when and where it's needed. And the thing is, at the end of this, as we continue to go on, the finance minister has indicated that he will reassess where we are with this kind of support, and he is still open to providing additional support to this if it's required after this program of support has concluded. For example, the fuel excise duty reduction has been extended for another 2 months, and that's because the current situation is clear that fuel prices are on the rise again. So it's been extended along with public transport as well. So we're going to react and to whatever the situation is, and I would expect that we would review things after that 3-month period, and if further support is required, then I'm fairly confident that that's what will happen.
And just talking about the support there, and you just touched on there in regards to the public transport fares, because we know that the government has said that funding for half-price public transport fares will continue for a further 2 months. Just bringing it home and looking a lot closer to home, just wondering how is that initiative going to support whānau here in Maniapoto, where there is no public transport, there's no public bus service, there's no public train service, there's not even an Uber, let alone a taxi service that can help with whānau who have, no means of transport to get to work, to kura, to their appointments, and so forth and so forth. So, how is that part of that initiative going to support our whānau and around that public transport?
Yeah, that's a fair question, because it's really aimed at whānau that live in areas where there are public transport options. So great for the part of my electorate, say in Paraparaumu and Kōrero, where they do have good public transport. On the other hand, they do have much higher costs in terms of accommodation. Although even in the provincial towns, accommodation is rising, has been rising. It's tending to go down at the moment, and predictions are will reduce by around 15%. So in some areas of my electorate, it's really good for whānau, but as you say, in Maniapoto, there's not a lot of options for public transport, so I do acknowledge that. But in in the urban areas of my electorate, where whānau are really struggling with both cost of living pressures on all parts of their lives. It does make a difference to their lives.
I do want to talk about health now, and just before we move into that, I just want to remind our whānau that if you do have any pātai that you would like to ask Adrian, that you can pop your questions in the comment section of the Facebook page, and a little bit later on we'll be able to share those questions with Adrian. You'll be able to get a first-hand answer from your MP. But just talking about health, Adrian, we see that around $1.3 billion has been allocated to health capital investments, and there is a number of initiatives that's going to come out of that pool. Can you share with us if any of that pūtea has been earmarked for our rural hospitals in Taumaranui and or Te Kuiti? And I guess if not, why not?
Yeah. So the way the capital works funding operates is that, as you say, there's a large amount that has been set aside. There are some specific projects that have been announced so far. One of them is Whangarei Hospital, and another one is the hospital in Nelson. But they also there'll be further announcements throughout the year where other projects will be made, and within there's also contingency which is spent when and where it's needed at the time. So I don't have anything specific for the rohe of Maniapoto, but if it's ranks high enough and the need in the next 12 months, then those announcements will be made. So, but I will have a talk to the Minister of Finance about that. I'm sure you'll be able to enlighten me about it, but at the moment I don't know where the over and above those two new hospitals where the balance of that money will be spent.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. I think our whānau would certainly appreciate a response from the minister. And just keeping with health here in Maniapoto, we know that $299 million has been earmarked for Māori health services. So just looking at what does that mean for whānau here in Maniapoto, who are already at the mercy of struggling health services? What kind of impact will we see here in Maniapoto?
Well, in terms of the direct funding, so there are a number of organisations within the Maniapoto area that gets funded for health services, and there are a number of different mechanisms and ways that they're funded. For example, some of that money goes into the Whānau Water Commissioning Agency, and there are a number of organisations that get funding through that. There is a number that receive funding through DHBs, as most of the listeners will know. That all of those DHBs will be no longer in existence from the 1st of July, and instead we'll have two organisations sitting side by side, Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority. And so that funding, along with an additional amount of money, which is decided by both those organisations in collaboration, how that money is spent. I expect that the organisations within the Maniapoto area will receive their fair share of the increases for funding. Those are negotiated, so I'm not at the table for those. But what I do know is that there is increases, quite significant increases, for services throughout the motu. And so, while I can't put an actual figure on it, I can say there will be increases to funding of those organisations.
When we look at the broader sense, I guess, and this has been, I guess, the topic of discussion around many tables, $30 million has been assigned to Māori health, but yet $150 million towards first-time home buyers. And looking at those figures, would it be fair to say that the government has prioritised first home buying for all you New Zealanders over health needs for Māori?
What figure are you using? Sorry, you said 30.
30 million has been assigned to Māori health, and 150 million towards the first-time home buyers initiative. So, looking at those figures, it seems that there's a little bit of an imbalance leaning towards, first-time home buyers over the health needs for Māori.
I have some quite different figures. And so these figures, I've just got it in front of me actually, from the Associate Minister of Health, the Honourable Peeni Henare, $168 million to the Māori Health Authority for direct commissioning of services, $20.1 million to support iwi Māori partnership boards, $30 million to support Māori primary and community care providers. I think that's the line that you're talking about, plus $39 million for Māori health workforce development. So this is new money. So this is over and above what we also already spend in those areas. I haven't got that line in front of me, but got to note that those figures are the amount of new money being spent. So it's I'm really happy with the amount of money that is being spent overall. I think the total spend in terms of that, plus the whānau order money and a couple of other lines, is $580 million. And so I would defend, that across the board, that's a pretty significant investment.
Thank you for clarifying those numbers for us. If we just kind of take a look back, and I refer back to the Māori Party who have worked out that $42 million allocated to the Māori Health Authority each year, and then they've divided that by the Māori population, which is around 850,000 people. It works out to be $49 per Māori per year to transform Māori health. And they had a wonderful graphic trying to explain this equation. So with the cost of seeing a GP, the cost of medication, notwithstanding the difficulties already experienced, accessing health services here in the rural areas of Maniapoto, that $49 is almost swallowed up in just one visit. Figures that have been broken down in that sense.
That ignores the point that I made earlier, that that money is for directly funded initiatives. I'm not sure if that's because my figure is 168 million. I think they're talking about the operating costs of the Māori Health Authority. That authority, as I said, will sit next to the New Zealand Health New Zealand. Not 1 cent of the additional $11.7 billion can be spent without the Māori Health Authority agreeing to it. And within the additional funding, that's the funding that goes to the health initiatives, like the doctors' visits, like the diabetes clinics at the hospitals, like surgeries throughout the country. This, the notion that, the admin costs of running the Māori Health Authority somehow equates to less for Māori health needs is absolutely incorrect. The entire health budget cannot be spent unless the Māori Health Authority agrees with it. And so it's incumbent upon the Māori Health Authority to make certain that Māori whānau throughout the country get a fair deal. What we know from the past is that the system, as described by other political parties, did not work, and we agreed. And now we're putting something in place that we're getting criticised on both the left and the right. And I kind of think we must have got it about right, because the National Party say they will get rid of it. I'm not sure what the Māori Party are advocating for, but they, if their figures are, if their criticisms are correct, then I'd like to know how much they would like to spend on the operational side of the Māori Health Authority. It needs to be efficient, absolutely, and it needs to be able to do what it needs to do. But I would argue that its bigger job is the spending of the total health budget, which they will absolutely have a say in.
Ka pai. Let's take a look at education now, and looking at the figures that I've got. So $777 million have been allocated to capital investment in the education sector. Just wonder, what does that look like for our tamariki, for our kura specifically here in Maniapoto?
Yeah, and so similar to the, same really to the health capital spend, there are, we have a growing population, and so of course we need to build new schools. And so and that includes a number of kura, and some still to be announced as to exactly which schools will be rebuilt. If that includes schools in Maniapoto, which I think it probably does, then of course I would be advocating for it. But you've got to have a starting point of allocating the pūtea first, and then there'll be a list of priority areas for exactly where those new schools are going to be. They tend to be in high population areas. They always have, like in South Auckland, huge growth there. So I would expect announcements to be made around schools there. Throughout my electorate, there are also growing areas. I would expect probably in Purirua that one of the proposals for a new school there will be being looked at and as part of this budget, and also in the Manawatu, which is also a growth area in my electorate.
So certainly a space to watch at this time for Maniapoto. Now, the government has already announced that there will be a $230 million boost for apprenticeships and support for ana and mahi and the Māori trades and the training fund. I guess turning that figure into practicality, what differences?
You there? I don't know if you can hear me.
Kia ora. So, sorry, we might have some technical problems, but I'll just go over that question again, Adrian. So, there's been a boost for apprenticeships and support for mana and mahi and the Māori trades to the tune of around $230 million. So, what does that look like for Maniapoto?
Yeah, well, the great thing about all of these initiatives is getting the unemployment rate down, and we've got it down to 3.2%. This is the lowest unemployment rate in 3 decades. And so these initiatives, many of them are continuation of initiatives that we've brought in over the last 4 or so years. And within that includes things like the apprenticeship program. And so we've put a lot of money into that area because, frankly, we do not have enough tradespeople, and so that makes a big difference in places like Maniapoto, because we need more builders, we need plumbers, we need all kinds of tradespeople. I will mention another area, and that is cadetships. And so cadetships are slightly different to the apprenticeship. So they can be in businesses. So they might be of more of a technical nature, and so they get funded to both work on the job and study. So I visited an organisation today that repairs appliances, and they've got 5 Māori cadets there, and so they're both training and learning on the job, and that's another avenue, because these are young people, young Māori that have generally got good qualifications but no job, and so they need some technical experience, and that's a way for them to get it. In terms of in Maniapoto, probably thinking about the jobs for nature, and there's the King Country River catchment restoration, and the Waitomo region restoration. That there's and a couple of other, I think, and from memory, it's around about 270 jobs in that jobs for nature, which like the Waitomo region restoration, you find that there'll be quite a few people that were in the tourist industry that have gone into that mahi while the tourist industry picks up. Those kinds of initiatives, along with all the others, will help the economy within the Maniapoto area, and actually the whole of Te Tai Hauāuru, and try and give the opportunity, especially to young people, for to have income, because even on some of these jobs are low to middle income areas, and so it's we think it's much better to try to get our people into work rather than be on the job seeker allowance, say. And there's there's no stigma to having the job seeker benefit, but there'd be most of the people on there are able to work and want to work, and so these kinds of initiatives. And it's a significant amount of money over all of them. Do go towards putting people into work, and Maniapoto areas is no different.
If we take a look at other initiatives that fall in the Māori sector, we see that $28 million has been assigned for protecting the appropriate use of mātauranga Māori and other taonga. I guess, how does that apply to our various marae and whānau and other experts in their respective fields here in Maniapoto?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of, what's the correct way? I don't want to say theft, but misuse of intellectual property of Māori, and that's both locally and internationally. So there's the use of everything from images to songs, to haka, to all sorts of artwork, and so it's incumbent upon us to actually try and protect as much as we can. It's a relatively small amount of money, but it'll be really effective in making certain that we're able to do that. So yeah, I think it's that, along with the overall, I think it's from the arts and culture sector as well, so there's a number of budget lines in there from memory that includes the support of Māori arts. I think they call them creatives in the creative sector. I'm quite pleased with that.
Now, we also see that around $306 million will be spent on capital funding for a new public media entity, and $40 million has been targeted to Māori media, but nothing has been mentioned about iwi radio, and so we're wondering why is that?
I think the announcement for iwi radio, there was an increase in last year's budget, which was a 4-year period, and if the numbers have just gone out of I can't remember actually. I should have looked that up. I should have known that was going to be asked. That's the only thing. It's I don't want to make things up, but I know that last year we made a 4-year commitment to increases, so that obviously hasn't changed this year. Now
we getting on to something a little bit lighter, I guess. We noticed last week that on budget day you delivered the karakia in Te Reo Māori before the sitting of the House, and that's something different to see, because it's not normally done, or the process isn't done like that. So are you able to explain to us that change?
Yeah, that change sort of came in with the current speaker, Trevor Mallard. He brought that in and decided, when was this? I think sometime last year, that he would have the other presiding officers, and there's currently altogether 5 of us, including him, that he would ask one of us to do the parliamentary prayer, and when it's my turn to do it, I always do it in te reo Māori. It's he likes to be quite inclusive of the team, and so he gives us a part to play. Also, when we have we have quite often celebrations of language weeks. So in the next week, when the house sits as Samoan language week, and so the prayer each day will be in the Samoan language, and it'll be done by there's a number of Samoan MPs in the House. We've had a celebration of a number of different languages throughout the Parliament. There's like we had Korean language week, and Melissa Lee, who's Korean, she did the prayer in Korean. We've had all the Pacific languages. And where there are several, like we had Cook Island Māori Language Week, and we had that one every day for 3 days in that week. But yeah, it is. I quite enjoy doing it, to be honest. And I think it's just an expression of the diversity that exists within the Parliament today, and so I think it's important that is done in the different languages.
Yeah, that was lovely indeed. Now, we know that your colleagues, the Māori ministers, are currently undertaking, their post-budget road trip, and they're still working their way around the country. But they've never seemed to come through Te Kuiti or Otorohanga.
No, they tried to do like this is I think this is the fourth one that they've done. Is it the fourth? Yeah. I believe this is the fourth time I've been on a road show, and they only do one place, like in Te Tai Hauāuru. I would put my hand up and say, you would do one in my electorate. And so they've done Porirua. They did Wanganui today for the first time. They've done New Plymouth, and they've done Palmerston North. So they're slowly making their way around my electorate.
Nice.
Yeah, so
we'll look forward to
I'll tell them next year. South Waikato.
Yes, lovely.
Yeah,
lovely. Now, we know that this was your colleague Grant Robertson's fourth wellbeing budget. And that's what it's been dubbed as, the well-being budget. We know that others have called it the vanilla cake with chocolate sprinkles budget. I've also heard on the street that the budget is being referred to as the boil up without meat. But for you, how do you think the people of Te Tai Hauāuru should remember the budget as, if you were to give it a name?
Okay, well, definitely securing our future. We're consolidating our position economically, and the forecast moving forward says that the inflation rate will rise and then progressively go down into next year, and by the end of the year, it should. The predictions is that it will be down almost to where we were pre-pandemic, and the I don't know if you saw, but the commentary from well-respected economists, that's their prediction that our growth will slowly increase. There are a number of measures, like the Reserve Bank today are putting in place to try to put downward pressure on inflation. But yeah, so for me, I would call it securing our future.
Securing our future budget. Lovely. Now, Adrian, just finally, we've spoken about a number of different initiatives. We've rattled off a whole range of figures and dollar amounts. What would be the key take-home messages for our whānau tonight in regards to what we've spoken about, in regards to the budget that was announced last week? What would be your final words to our whānau here in Maniapoto?
My final words is really picking up on what something the Minister of Finance is talking about. It's a very finely balanced budget where we're spending money, but we're trying not to inflame inflation any more than it already has. And so, we're putting a significant amount of money into cost of living, but we're doing it in a way that doesn't push inflation higher. It's also important that we spend on services, and the biggest amount of service increase is in the health sector. It had been neglected for my biggest criticism would be of the previous government, who did not set aside enough money for infrastructure, for new hospital builds. In fact, in the last 2 years, they set it at zero, and we're sort of having to pick up that cope up now, and making certain that we have enough money and set aside for new hospitals. So very finely balanced budget that does enough to give people additional pūtea, to counter some of the cost of living pressures, but also to spend money where it's needed across the board amongst all of those services. And so I'd also point to the fact that on the 1st of April, before those measures were taken place, we had a significant increase to those on benefits, those on superannuation, and those on student allowances as well, and also the increase to the minimum wage. I'm certain that we will look at the minimum wage again. We're all about having a high wage economy, and so my expectation is that we will push that towards and eventually get to the living wage level, which increases quite regularly. But our aim is to get the minimum wage up to a living wage. And I think at that time, we will have made significant impact on those whānau that are living in poverty. And so, that's one of the key things that I push in the, especially in the Labour Māori caucus. I don't know if any of the listeners know this, but the budget process actually starts around about August, September of the previous year. And so this budget will come to an end and the next one starts. And so, that's about the time that we start putting policy together. And I've consistently argued for the minimum wage to be pushed, and I'm really pleased that we've managed to get it up. I think when we came into government, it was around $15, and it's now well over $20. So I'm really pleased about that.
Ka pai. Tēnā koe. Thank you very much for coming along tonight and clarifying and breaking down the budget, and also, thank you for taking the opportunity to get some answers from your colleagues, from the Minister of Finance. And also, just, I guess, fingers crossed for some potential good news from the Education Minister in that sector for Maniapoto. I kind of heard you alluded to it, but so fingers crossed for that, because we know that Maniapoto is such a growing population. But thank you for giving us some insight into the decisions that are going to affect whānau here in Maniapoto. I think it was well timely, and I think that our whānau needed to hear direct what the budget means to them. So, te rangatira, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe wani tangotira, kia koutou hokorongo mai nā e tēnei pō, ka nui te mihi atu kia koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe. It's Adrian Rurawhe, MP for Te Tai Hauāuru. Well, e te iwi, that wraps up our session for tonight. If you want to take another look at the delivery of the budget and hear some of the outcomes for Māori, then you can head over to our MFM Facebook page to find that episode. But as always, MFM will keep you up to date with all that is happening within the rohe right across our various platforms. We will be back soon for another live Q&A here on Te Puna Kōrero or Te Nehe Nui. Thank you for joining us. Look after one another. Stay safe. Take care. Ki te kotahi te waihoe, ka ora te iwi, pō Mārie.